Welcome to our Heat Networks Regulation Preparing for Registration video series. My name is Dominic and I'm a Senior Policy Lead for Heat Networks at Ofgem. The overall aim of this video series is to help you understand what heat network registration is, why it's required, what you need to do to prepare for it, and what to expect of the registration process. We have two videos as part of this series. This video, part 1, will cover what registration is, why you need to register, and who needs to register. This also includes what providers should be aware of, compliance with regulation, and the regulated activities. Part 2 will walk you through the registration process step by step, the support available to you, and next steps. We recommend that you watch both videos to have a full understanding of how to prepare to register your heat networks. When we say you or your in this video, we're talking about those who are subject to heat network regulation and therefore need to register their heat networks with us. Registration with Ofgem is a one-off activity that all existing heat network operators and suppliers need to do. This will establish the contact and relationship with Ofgem and is the focus of this video series. The authorization conditions are the rule book for heat networks and cover a range of consumer protection requirements and other provisions to support regulation. These conditions came into effect on 27th of January 2026. If you currently operate or supply a heat network, you are an authorized person and are required to comply with these conditions. We have taken an outcomes-based approach to regulation. This is a diverse sector, from sole traders running communal networks in single buildings to district networks run by large developers and established energy companies, and a very significant part of the sector in social housing. Rather than prescriptive rules, where possible, we are focused on consumer outcomes we want to see, treating customers fairly, including pricing fairly, and giving clear and transparent information on the costs that customers are paying. This is supported by requirements to have a complaints process and backed up by an independent route to redress through the Energy Ombudsman if that does not result in a satisfactory outcome. The overall aim is to ensure customers are protected and to build consumer and investor confidence in the sector through a stable and trustworthy framework. Heat network operators and suppliers should now be taking steps to ensure compliance with the requirements of heat networks regulation. Think about your current operations and practices and whether these will achieve the outcomes expected in the authorization conditions. Are there some changes you will need to make? Take action to meet the requirements of regulation. Remember that the focus of regulation is all about consumer outcomes. We have published a page on our website which explains our approach to compliance in the first year of regulation. We recommend that you review and familiarize yourself with this alongside our authorization conditions and guidance, including the registration guidance. These pages are linked in the video description. Ofgem is now the regulator for heat networks, and we have created the registration process to gather information about existing heat networks. Registration will only be required once per heat network. We have developed a digital service to facilitate regulation, and this is the platform where regulated parties will engage with us and register their heat networks. This service will be launched by the 20th of April 2026. It will initially be accessible by request only in private beta, but the invitation is open to all heat networks. We will discuss private beta in more detail soon. This is a common practice when launching any digital service and enables us to work with users of the service to identify and address bugs early on before making the service fully available. The deadline for registering your heat networks with us is the 26th of January 2027. The new regulations define district heat networks, those that supply multiple buildings, and communal heat networks, those that supply a single building divided into separate premises. The premises is a self-contained unit treated as a distinct unit for the purposes of heat supply and charging, typically a dwelling or a non-domestic unit. Both district and communal heat networks fall under regulation and need to be registered with us. Some heat networks, such as self-supply and industrial heat networks, need to be registered with us, but have fewer obligations. There are some networks that may be identified as heat networks, but are not covered by the regulations or are exempt. For example, single households and multiple occupation, or HMOs, converted buildings with domestic-style heating systems, and third-party waste heat producers. Converted building has a particular meaning that is set out in the regulations and explained in the guidance for registration available on our website. As part of the transition to regulation, existing heat networks, including any that become operational before 27th January 2027, are automatically authorized by the regulations. This is called deemed authorization. Deemed authorization means that you can commence or continue your activities without needing to apply to Ofgem. We need to identify and gather information about your heat networks and establish an understanding of compliance across the market with the new rules. So we have created a requirement to register your heat networks with us. This requirement is set out in the authorization condition for registration. We'll now go on to talk about who needs to register and regulated activities. Before we move on to the registration process, it is important to be clear about the difference between operators and suppliers, as this affects what information you'll need to provide and what obligations apply to you. An operator is the authorized person responsible for controlling the transfer of thermal energy on a heat network. This means having ultimate responsibility for how the network is run and for key decisions about its operation, long-term reliability, and technical compliance. A supplier is the authorized person responsible for the commercial relationship with customers. This includes billing, customer service, handling complaints, and setting charges. In many cases, the same organization will act as both operator and supplier. Where these roles are split, both parties have responsibilities during registration, which we will explain shortly. We expect that in most circumstances, there will only be one operator and supplier on a network. Some authorized persons appoint third-party companies, such as managing agents, to carry out activities on their behalf. In these cases, the legally responsible operator or supplier remains the authorized person and retains responsibility for registration and ongoing compliance, even if another organization completes the tasks in practice. The role of operator is focused on responsibility for the physical infrastructure of the heat network and the consumer outcomes related to how that infrastructure performs and is maintained. The operator has ultimate control over how the heat network should operate. They will have authority over key decisions about the network infrastructure, investments, and upgrades. Ownership of network assets may indicate this level of substantial control, but is not a requirement if it is established by other means, such as certain concession arrangements. We are aware that operators may contract out the day-to-day operation and maintenance of their heat network. The role of supplier is all about the customer service and commercial relationship with heat network customers. Suppliers issue bills, provide billing information, and act as the main point of contact for consumers. This includes handling complaints and providing information and support. The supplier is responsible for most of the consumer protection requirements and the authorization conditions. Suppliers may also use third parties for functions such as metering, billing, or customer service. This does not change who the supplier is for regulatory purposes, as the supplier remains responsible for the customer relationship and the consumer protection requirements. While the definitions of operator and supplier are set out clearly in the regulations, we recognize that in practice, delivery models can vary. The key principle is where ultimate responsibility sits. The operator is the organization with overarching control of how the heat network is run and remains responsible even where day-to-day activities are contracted out. The supplier is the organization responsible for the commercial relationship with customers, including billing, complaints, and customer communications. Where third parties such as managing agents are involved, they may carry out activities on behalf of the authorized person, but they do not replace the operator or supplier unless they themselves hold that legal responsibility. This is a fairly common example of a communal heat network, a residential block of flats with a communal boiler. With ownership and responsibility for building services, including heat assets, the freeholder would generally be the operator. There are, of course, a range of models in the housing sector, so expect this will not always be the case. A number of different entities could be the supplier, and this will depend on the housing model and who has responsibility for those customer-facing commercial arrangements. The energy center label in this illustration refers to what might be more commonly called the plant room. Energy center refers to a location housing equipment for heat generation, water treatment, and storage. This is an example of a district heat network. It has multiple buildings and could be located within a single site or spanning a much wider area. The operator and supplier may be a local authority, an ESCO, or a developer. It is important to note that this example heat network includes 2 residential blocks. These buildings will each have an in-building or secondary heat network and are themselves communal heat networks. These are authorized separately to the wider district heat network because it may be the case that a separate entity has responsibility for the secondary heat network, for example, in a bulk supply agreement. And this is why during the registration process, communal heat networks must be registered separately so we can capture details about the secondary heat network within the building. For awareness, an entity is any legal person, such as a company, local authority, or registered provider that may act as an operator or supplier. As mentioned, the digital service will be launched initially in private beta. We're doing this because testing the service with real users enables us to make sure we provide the service that meets people's needs. A user is an individual who has been given access to the digital service by the regulatory contact, with permissions to view or submit information. Joining our private beta means that you can complete registration early and give us vital feedback that we'll use to develop the service. If you register your heat networks in private beta, you will not need to register them again when we launch the full service publicly. Although the service is in a test phase, it is reliable to use and your data is secure. The private beta phase will run for at least 2 months, but the service is available to all to use as part of private beta. You just need to request access to participate. More details on joining private beta can be found in the video description. This slide summarizes the information needed to complete registration at a high level. The organization information is a universal requirement. The heat network information is dependent on your specific circumstances, whether you are a supplier, operator, or both, and the type of heat network you're registering. Once you're in the digital service, it explains what information is required as you go through each section, based on your answers that you provide. Some information about your organization is just provided once. Then for each heat network you register, there will be information specific to that network that you will need to provide. Prior to being able to sign into the digital service, this slide provides more detail on the information required for registration. Please note this is not a fully comprehensive and it doesn't cover list and it doesn't cover all user journeys. Therefore, this should be read in conjunction with the registration guidance that is linked to in the video description. Registration is completed through Ofgem's digital service, and each organisation must provide a regulatory contact. This should ideally be the most senior person responsible for the heat network operations and regulatory compliance in that organisation. The regulatory contact creates the organisation account, manages user access and permissions, and remains responsible for ensuring the information submitted is accurate and complete, even where other users are involved. Thank you for watching part 1 of our Preparing for Registration video series. In our next video, we will walk through the registration process step by step.